Good morning. I think I'm on. I'm supposed to be on. Yeah, we're on. Bring you greetings over the weekend from Carolina Bible Camp. Had a great crew show up and got a lot of things ready. And we covered your prayers here in about a week. Right at 130 right now are going to be gathering. We're praying for more campers. Need a few more campers. It'd make it even a better week. But always look forward to this opportunity. And as always, this time of the year, I'm grateful to the elders through the years who have allowed me to participate in two incredibly blessings to me, Carolina Bible Camp and Horizons. And I'll be gone next week, not next week, the following week for a week, be home, and then be gone to Horizons over in West Tennessee. And right now, that week is closed. Right at 1,300 individuals are scheduled to be together over at Freed-Hardeman University in the first full week in July. So several of our folks are going over from here. The blessing of all that coming up, the thought of week one coming up, and we're focused, the first time we've ever used Hebrews. I'm a little anxious. Jack and I have talked about it. It is a pretty aggressive text for juniors. But the key thought the entire first week this year in camp is going to be, how many of you have a Life is Good shirt? I'm just curious. Remember those shirts, Life is Good? Some of you have those shirts. Life with Jesus is better. That's the whole thought process of the week. And that's what the writer in Hebrews talks about. There are a lot of opportunities that are available, offered in the world, but life with Jesus is better. There is nothing that is better than an experience with Christ. And here, as we've looked over the last several months at the Ephesian letter, this first part of this text is tough. Verse 1, we are given a command by God to live like God. To significantly do what God wants us to do. That is a signature opportunity that we have. If we're going to be His children, then we're going to live like Him. Number 2, in verse 2, He talks, we're commanded to love like God. We're told if we live like Him and love like Him, in verses 3 through 7 in that text, and He says to leave the world and its ways behind, kind of similar to 1 Peter 2, that we're supposed to be strangers and aliens here. When's the last time you felt like a stranger or an alien? And an audience this vast, there may be some of you that have had that feeling where you were in an environment where you didn't feel welcome, or you were in an environment where you didn't feel like you fit in. I wonder sometimes if we fit in a little bit too much in the world. That is something that we don't struggle with enough, that we don't differentiate enough between the behaviors and the choices that are in the world. We were talking in class this morning that one of the real dissonances or one of the real disconnects with the world and the church is sometimes we're considered to be hypocritical. We say one thing and maybe live another way. We claim to be maybe individuals that make good choices, and then individuals that really know us know, well, maybe some of the choices we're making are not the choices that we should be making. And those that really know us realize that, and there's a disconnect between who we claim to be and who we really are. Well, but shouldn't there be a fact that someone says, there's a Christian, and I can tell by their behavior, by the choices that they make, by the things they choose to do and the things that they choose not to do. Now, this first thought that he shares is one that may be a little tougher for some of us, because he says, you once were darkness. In other words, we're changed, and we're darkness before we are light. And we've talked about this sometimes within the church family. Some of us, that's not something that we necessarily have felt. We grew up in the church. We've had a Christian background. We've had all of our lives. That doesn't mean that we've been perfect people. That doesn't mean that we haven't failed, that we haven't made poor choices. We're human. That's going to happen. But in that text in Ephesians 5, when he says, for you were once darkness, remember, he's talking to a crowd here who understood that. They had made some really poor choices. And they had been involved in some lifestyles and some things that were really outside the body of Christ, outside of doing anything good, and all of a sudden they've been converted. And why is it? I don't know this dynamic. I don't understand it. But a lot of times we've talked, those individuals seem to have a greater fervor. And you look at Paul. Now, I know he wasn't converted from badness to goodness, because he, at first in his conversion process, Thought he was doing everything to please God. His whole life. He said, I've done everything in good conscience to this day. But he did commit murder. And that haunted him for the rest of his life as he participated. We know he participated in Stephen's murder. There were obviously potentially others. And he realized, I've done something that really displeased God. Is it the case that the more we feel like we have displeased God, the more we appreciate the forgiveness we have received? I think the Bible speaks to that. Remember, he's in the house of Simon, who's talking about the lady that comes in, whom he knows is a lady of ill repute in the community. And Jesus is responding. In Simon's thought process, he doesn't think the Lord hears him in his thought process. If Jesus knew what kind of woman this was, he would not have this relationship with her, wouldn't be interacting with her. And Jesus tells him the parable of the one forgiven of a little and one forgiven of a lot. And said, of which one is going to be more grateful? Which one is going to be to realize their forgiveness more? We don't have the indication that Simon ever gets it. That he realizes Jesus is talking about you. And if we're really honest with ourselves, see, we were darkness, we are light. So there's that transformation that has occurred. And so if we're light, then we live like it. That's the whole thought process from Ephesians 5 this morning. Then on a daily basis and in a regular way, people that see us and know us, whether it be in our neighborhood or at work or at school or wherever we may be, they see a person who claims to be Christian. We talked a little bit about this in class this morning. And in those moments when people know who we are and know what our claim is, and the response that people have to that, because they do watch us. And if we claim Christianity, and if we claim to be a follower of God, then they're going to say, well, what about the things you choose to do? Where are the places you choose to go? The things you choose to participate in? That is a declaration to the world, I am a follower of God, and I'm going to make these particular choices. That's why then we're going to be characterized by some things. And he mentions, don't be partakers, but then all of a sudden when he says, walk as children of light, for the fruit of the Spirit is, and he could have gone into the whole list here from Galatians. You know, the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. He could go into the whole list. He highlights three particular characteristics. Number one, he says it's seen in our goodness. In our goodness. Why is it weird for me sometimes when you say goodness, people go, oh. I mean, is it just me? Or people don't see it to be much of a challenge to be good? That goodness, that making good choices, wanting to be in a good environment is a good thing. We live in a world that kind of wants to challenge, wants to go out on the edges. And I get that. One of my favorite commercials used to be, and I'm no longer partaking of that particular beverage. I love it when I say that and you're sitting going, what beverage is he talking about? I finally quit Mountain Dew. Hello, my name is Kirk and I'm a Dew-aholic, or I used to be. Love that drink. Love that drink. I was told by several individuals, especially my daughter, and several dear friends that love me, not good for your kidney. This is not like a wholesale statement for all that, okay? And I know somebody's going to, well, what you're drinking now is not any better. Switched over to Orange Crush. I know. It's at least caffeine free. That's all I got for this morning. But the Mountain Dew commercials to me were always some of the coolest. You know, you got this guy riding his bike and he's just close to, or he's jumping out of an airplane, or he's out parasailing, and all, you know, and that's the culture we live in. And all of those, and I'm not saying any of those things are wrong, but I think sometimes what happens to us is we think making good choices is a mundane life. I want to tell you this morning, making good choices can be the most exhilarating way to live. When you go back to God and you figure out how He designed us for particular choices and even substances, and I know I could even admitted to a weakness this morning with beverages, with the orange crush, but God designed us that if we make good choices, we're going to be better off physically, emotionally, mentally. Because we were designed to function doing good things. It's not unusual that when individuals make poor choices, the sub-effects of that and the negative impact of those choices affects us physically, emotionally, and mentally. So goodness is a good choice. He even says as well, the fruit of the Spirit is goodness, righteousness. Now there's a similarity between those two. Goodness is those things that we choose to partake of. Righteousness is a state of mind. I want to do what is right. I've mentioned this before. I'm grateful to be raised in a home where I had a father, strong disciplinarian, mother, not as strong in disciplinarian, but in modeling out before me. My mom, my birth mother, as I've mentioned before, is probably one of the most docile individuals I've ever known in my life. And one of the individuals that if I ever knew an individual that characterized the spirit of, I just want to do good stuff. I want to please people, was my mom. And in those choices, it's a state of mind, it's an attitude of making right choices that lead to right actions. Righteousness is something, of course, the writer in Romans says, how many of us are? None of us. No one is righteous. No, not one. In fact, our intent, our mind is outside of that. We can be made righteous. The Corinthian writer will say about, He made Him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might be made the righteousness of God. So it's not something, I can't make myself righteous. Christ makes me righteous. But I can strive. And I believe with all of my heart that's what the writer in 1 John is talking about later when he talks about if we walk in the light as He is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Christ continues to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And it is that spirit of that attitude of I want to please God. Do you believe, or would you at least for a moment think with me, aren't most of the positive things that occur in our life because we're trying to please God, and when it's a negative impact, it's because we're trying to please ourselves? But when the two line up, when I can please God and please myself, and again because of the design concept of God, let us make man in our image. We were created. One of the most popular passages in all of Scripture, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8, for by grace you have been saved, not of works, lest you boast, not of yourselves, lest we esteem, but we are God's, verse 10, workmanship, created into Christ Jesus for good works. From any standpoint, if you think about a piece of equipment, whether it be a particular piece of machinery at work or a car, or whatever, the design, the original design intent, from a human standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, we were designed to be good. That was God's initial intention for us. When you misuse the merchandise, it gets abused. So we're goodness, righteousness, and truth. I can't ever say truth anymore. It belays, you can't handle the truth. I can't get that. Y'all remember the movie that's from. It's in a particular courtroom scene, and the individual that makes that statement is trying to really get under the skin of a particular colonel. And of course, the power of the script, he eventually says the right thing that triggers this individual to admit to doing something that in his mind he was convinced was right. And in a militaristic mindset, he was convinced because of the protection of a greater number of individuals that the life of one individual was insignificant. Truth is that moment, and that was one of the outcries of that particular movie, was truth will protect those who are innocent, but there are also, even at the result of that, sometimes the resultant punishments and the results of making a poor choice. See, truth is about understanding what God wants. A pursuit of truth, genuine truth, absolute truth. And when you say that word in our world, they go, but truth depends. On what? Well, it depends on what you think or what I think or what a group of individuals thinks. That's what determines truth. Nope. Truth's only determined one place and by one person. By God in His Word. And He has the right, the absolute right to hold me and you to a standard of conduct. Because He has offered in that standard of conduct a way of forgiveness, knowing our flaws. There is no more powerful picture than the cross. Than the culmination on Calvary of God punishing sin once and for all. That's what the writer John says. That He has at once and for all punished sin so that you and I may not be punished, that we might be forgiven. And it is in that truth. See, in verse 10 of chapter 5, finding out what is acceptable to the Lord. That is our pursuit. We live like it. We want to live our lives in such a way that God is pleased with our choices and with the things that we do. And then He gives, we're commanded, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. So we're given a prohibition, if you would. We're commanded because we are to have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. Now, this gets really complicated sometimes because Jesus' prayer in John that we've been talking about all year is that we may be one. And His prayer for His disciples was that they be in the world but not of the world. And He'll go into great detail talking about our relationship with each other as Christians, but also our relationship with those who are lost in the world. And we can't affect those in the world if we don't have some sort of relationship with Him. But it's the relationship that we have with Him. It's not a participatory relationship. It's not because in Romans, Paul was saying, shall we continue in sin that grace may abound? No, if I sin more, I'm not going to get more grace. That's not the concept. Neither is the concept, well, if I do things with those who are in the world, then I'm going to be able to identify with Him more. No, that's not what He's saying. He said you need to have a relationship with Him that says, I love you for who you are, but not for what you're doing. We have no fellowship with the sin that they're participating in. We're to guard our hearts, our minds, our souls. Look at 1 John 4, verse 4. I mentioned 1 John already, but he spends quite a bit of time in 1 John. You are of God, little children, and have overcome them, because He who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. And then he describes, they are of the world, therefore they speak as the world, and the world hears them. We are of God. He who knows God hears us. He who is not of God does not hear us. By this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error. There's right and there's wrong. Beloved, let us love one another, for love is of God, and everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. And he'll say later in this same text, they didn't love him in the world won't love us. It's because of the choices that we make that are not like the world. That's when we differentiate from the choices that the world makes. And it's in that moment that we in a sense do a judgment. Because he'll say, not only we command it, but he also gives us a commission. He says, reprove them, and that's the commission, and also expose them. How do you do that? In a Christian way. We make it a point to make sure that we communicate with individuals what God expects. And we had a great discussion in class this morning about the difference in doing that in an arrogant way. I'm right, you're wrong. In a way of living. Let me share with you a relationship that I have with Christ, and I'm concerned about some of the choices that you're making. I think God has a better option for you. I think God has a better way for you that you can change the choices that you're making, make better choices, and be in a much better place, in a much better relationship. But we do that, we speak the truth in love. Not in arrogance. Not in, I've figured this thing out. In fact, somebody shared one of the greatest ways, and a couple of folks mentioned in classes, we share our own journey, our own story, the fact that we weren't perfect until Christ got a hold of us, and we're still a work in progress. We're only made perfect by Christ. I'm only sinless because of what Jesus did, not because of anything I've done. And I still struggle because I'm human. And that's what Romans 3 signifies. We are all sinners saved by grace. And it's learning how to share that in its most effective way. And as Paul lays this out, when he says, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness, but rather expose them, for it is shameful even to speak of the things which are done by them in secret, but all things that are exposed are made manifest by the light. For whatever makes manifest is light. Light highlights the difference. It's really cool yesterday to see the new lights go up at Carolina Bible Camp. Always when I see something new brought into CBC, I have this, and anybody that's ever been there knows exactly what I'm talking about. You look at that particular structure, is it going to be able to stand up to the rigors and the kids and the staff? I've always told individuals, if you want to try a product out for its durability, let us have it for 7 weeks, and if it makes it through the 7 weeks of camp, you can sell that as a product that is durable. Because you got diversity of individuals coming in, you got all kinds. And I see these, and kids, listen to me very carefully. This is one thing I'm going to mention this first week. Those of you who are going, the new light posts are not, I'm trying to think of the right term. They're not made to grab a hold of and swing around. Because that's what I can see every kid going, oh, look at this, a new pole. These aren't designed that sturdy, not even as sturdy as the previous lights, but there is something about these that is significant. They go all the way from the from the craft that be the kitchen, dining hall, thank you very much, from the dining hall all the way down to the gazebo. There is light in places now that we've wanted light for years. We have a lot more lights at camp. That's not as significant a thing it is junior week as it may be other weeks. And you go, oh, I know what you're talking about. We want light all over that place. We want to light it up like New York City, just boom, light it up. Because darkness provides opportunities for people to hide. People don't think about that, do they? Oh, you know what I'm talking about. But the more light, the less opportunity for darkness. You go, boy, that's not complicated. That's basic science. Yeah. And that's God's admonition to us as Christians. It's time for us to light up the place. for the light of Christ, the light of God. Because in Matthew 5, he said, you are the light of the world. I'm tired. We talked about this in class this morning. I'm tired of Christians being seen in the world as individuals that don't get it. And I think we kind of cater to that, and we won't speak up because we don't want to be seen as individuals that we're not being sensitive or not being. We do get it. God's given us of His Spirit and His heart and His mind. And it's okay to say certain things are right and certain things are wrong, and let that shine. And not be ashamed that we're making good choices. Am I wrong, or do I sometimes feel us going, we don't feel empowered by God saying, you can do this, and this is something God has allowed you to do in His glory. Because He said there are things that we can't do, and we want to be careful. I think sometimes we're being a little bit too careful with folks. And what I mean by that sincerely is we're going to be so careful that we're going to let them go to hell and not show them that we care. That we literally accept the responsibility. You're going, but do you have the right? Not personally, but I've got the God-given right to share the truth in a way that makes a difference in a world that desperately, desperately needs to hear it. Because too many people are convinced what they're doing is okay because they don't know better. Nobody's warned them. Nobody's said anything. Because if you want to get around to the real bottom, nobody cares. The most caring person you should know in any neighborhood, church, job site, or should be a Christian. Because he's got the heart of God, whose greatest desire is for the salvation of all. Live like it. Will we live like it? This morning, there's an opportunity for you to say, okay, it's time. I want to live for God. Maybe you haven't made that initial step into a relationship with God. Penitent faith, confession of Jesus, Lord, and baptism. Knowing that it's time to make a change, come out of darkness, come into light. Maybe it's some other struggle. Maybe it's something you want to share. That you make us aware of something that you're dealing with that we can pray for. Or maybe share some information. Maybe it's an experience we've had and we've struggled through and we can help. Anyway, we can be a benefit this morning. Would you come while we stand and while we sing?